Welcome to Life, Lessons, and Laughter with your host, Glenn Ambrose.
Hello, everybody. Hello. Welcome to the show. What do you think about my new background? I got the logo from my book, that yin yang symbol. I think you guys have seen that before. I also have a different frame around it. Now, let me know which one you guys like. For those of you watching this on video, let me know which one background images you guys like and why. Be interested. So here we go. What am I talking about? Ages of perception. So I got some new insights on some things the other day, and I wanted to do a podcast on it. But I think I'll start with kind of giving some framework, like an overview of, kind of putting this concept in place before I dive into it a little bit. Some of this I've said before. So those of you that listen all the time may have heard versions of this. But the way that I kind of see the unfolding of the spiritual awakening that I believe is happening. And it's funny, it like before I used to say, there's a spiritual shift happening globally, and people would just usually after I said it, it was kind of quiet. People wouldn't disagree or agree. They would just kind of wait for me to say the next thing and we would move on. Now, when I say it, people are like, oh, yes. They're like, I see it everywhere. I see signs of it everywhere. So, which is really cool. So the way that I kind of make sense of this spiritual shift that's happening is basically throughout human history, it's good to take a step back and gain perspective and kind of, look at things from a broader perspective to make sense of things. It's the chaos theory. You take a step back and then things start to make sense. So, for really thousands of years, society was ruled by the basic concept of do what you're told. You don't really have any control over your own life. Things are the way that they are. And this really was the foundational block of society. And it's shown through things like the caste system. You're born into a certain caste and you have no chance of getting out of that. The royalty structure, if you're born into royalty, then that's where you are. That's your status in society. It is reflected in parental upbringing. Really kids did what they were told, and if they didn't, they get a little backhand or something. And then it was like, oh, okay, like they're in charge. I have to do what I'm told. And then they dropped into a place of acceptance and then they did it. And if they ever got out of line, they get another backhand or beating or whatever. And then they got back on track into that way of thinking. And there wasn't as much emotional suffering back then because the people weren't coming in so sensitive. I think that this is part of the spiritual shift that a lot of people don't understand. We're having a spiritual shift, and part of it coming into this world is that each generation is being born a little bit differently. And one of the main aspects of that, one of the main traits of that is our sensitivity levels. Because to bring in a new way of being, a new a whole new way of being based in love, we have to be much more sensitive to love, to understand why we need to make this change. We need to be more sensitive to our feelings. And so it's helping us bring in this new way of being based in love. But the previous generations often, it's always been like this. Previous generations don't understand the younger generations. Well, I said it's always been like this. It's always been like this as far as I've been alive, which the spiritual shift has been happening that long, right? So maybe it wasn't that much like this in the previous generations. I'm sure there was some differences because as you get older, most people kind of forget what it's like to be young. So that explains some of the differences in perceptions. Once you understand things as an adult that are so clear to you, and then you describe them to your child and they see it differently, you're like, what's wrong with you? Like, why don't you see this? I just explained it to you. It's so obvious, and we forget that when we were young, our parents explained stuff to us that we just weren't ready to perceive. So, but I think that the gap there wasn't that big for thousands and thousands and thousands of years. Like the kids were coming in very similarly to their parents because there wasn't a huge spiritual shift happening. So there was no reason for them to be that different. They were going to live in a society that was very similar to their parents. Now things are changing dramatically. So the difference between us and the next generation is increased, to bring in a new consciousness that's capable of creating a new world and living in it, so there's, it increases the gap. But back to the overview, basically we lived on this planet as human beings is because I said so, because you were born into it, because that's the way it is. That's just how society ran for thousands and thousands and thousands of years. And of course, there was pushback here and there, and certain societies had situations that culminated into high levels of misery, where the lower levels revolted towards the higher ups and all that stuff. And then they would just go create another society, or somebody else would take them over, and and that went on for thousands of years. Now we've run out of land to just go start a new society. We're connected globally in a way we've never been before through technology. So now and society is completely intermingled, like whether we realize this or not. Like what happens in the United States, like the United States is right, how do I phrase this? Right near right in the top, maybe in the top 3 of what we would label as like developed societies. So that's where we're going to see it more, right? We're going to see the changes taking place and the difficulties and all that more than a less developed society, because they haven't gotten to that place yet. But if the United States crumbles as a society, that's affecting the entire globe. Like it just is. We're just too connected, through import and export and protection from other countries and all this stuff. Like we are so interconnected now that if a major society falls, it's going to affect the entire globe. So this is why the spiritual shift is happening now globally, because it needs to. We can't compartmentalize anymore like we could have 2,000 years ago, So globally, the spiritual awakening is happening, and I think the first shift out of that was going from "'cause I said so" mentality, basically. Everything's structured systems. It's just how it is, to ballpark 1960-ish, where all of a sudden a lot of the hippies came in, and this new generation of people questioning things. And what did they question? They questioned structured systems that were in place forever. They questioned organized religion. They questioned how to live their lives. They questioned corporate America or corporate society and structures. They questioned governmental structures. And that was the beginning of this spiritual shift. I mean, even back then in the 60s and 70s, they were singing, "This is the age of Aquarius." Well, or the dawning of the age of Aquarius. It wasn't the age of Aquarius, yeah. It was the dawning of it. It was the coming of it. It was the beginning of it. Now we're in the age of Aquarius, where everything's supposed to be changing. So that's where it started. And it started with them questioning everything. Large groups, and it wasn't just America, it was all over the world, where the hippie movement was questioning things and shaking structures. And nothing has ever been the same ever since then. A lot of hippies thought that they failed at what they were trying to do because they were trying to change the world. And it's just, you just can't change the world that quickly. They did what they were supposed to do. They had an edge to them. Like, a lot of it was love and hippy dippy stuff, but they were also willing to stand up and fight. They had an edge. They had a very strong rebellious side. They would stand up against the police and get beaten or arrested, thrown in jail, whatever. That takes a hard edge to do. And that was part of their personality. Some people talk about that as the indigo children, which I think I was. I've definitely got that anti-establishment rebellious edge. And then so that started it all, and it shook everything. And as we're coming in, and this is kind of where I started seeing things a little bit more, what I'll say, clearly, in stages of kind of what happens next. But I think I'll wrap up the big vision before I dive into that. So instead of diving right into it now. So, they questioned everything. And then now our awareness is arising as to, it's taken decades of this stuff to take root, because we're turning an ocean liner around. We're not spinning around on a dime like a sports car. This takes a while. You're changing global perception of reality. That's going to take a while. So it's been decades and decades of questioning things and adjustments, small adjustments being made in society and stuff like that. And now we're at the point where we're awakening to the dysfunction, and we're going like, oh, okay, wait a minute. It's not just the corporate America or just the government. Like, everything is messed up. Like, the way we function is messed up. The way we live our lives, we're too fast. We're spending all our time away from our families. We work for 30 years and then die. We don't have retirement set up. That, like, is this all that life's about? Like, we're starting to finally realize that we're off track, not just society. I think in the beginning, like the hippie years, we just kept pointing the finger at the higher ups and going like, oh, well, they're all messed up. And we're still in the process of doing that. But it's starting to trickle down into our own lives, and we're starting to take responsibility for our own lives. And we're starting to go, wait a minute, I'm not happy in my personal life. I'm stressed out all the time in my personal life. I'm missing my family's lives, like and their experiences as they grow, and I have no friends, and I, like, life is going too quickly, and blah 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 blah, and I'm not fulfilled, and this is no way to live, that type of stuff. So it's, I think we've gotten to the point where our awareness is heightened more and more and more, and we're starting to understand that really what we thought was the problem, and I think we're in the middle of this now, because many people still think that the governments and the higher ups are the problem. And in a way, they kind of are, but it's because they're a reflection of us. We are so dysfunctional. We have such low standards for our lives that the people that have been allowed, because that's what it is, we, the people, have allowed the governments to be in place. It's our fault that they're there. It's always been that way. Even 2,000 years ago, when you had just a, whatever, I'll make up some number, if you have 1 million slaves being ruled by 10,000 people, that's not possible. If the 1 million slaves come together and say, we're not going to put up with this, it's just impossible. You can't, a small percentage of people cannot rule over gigantic numbers of people. And I don't care about their military. It can't be done unless the people that are being ruled over say it's okay, because they can just come together, stand up and say no. Right. I mean, that's what happened in India with Gandhi. It's, they just said, no, we're not going to allow you to tell us what to do. And if you can't control us, there's no reason for you to be here. So you'll just leave on your own accord. We don't have to fight you. We're just not going to let you control us. And then we'll get what we want. And they did, So that, it's our collective fault that dysfunctional people are at the helm and have been for, just to be clear, I'm not picking on a particular political party. I think the entire political system is shot to hell and rotten to its core. So I don't care who's been in presidency the last, forever, but let's be more specific, the last 50 years, they're all, it's the governmental system that is hurting its people in many ways. But we won't get into politics, obviously. So this is the global shift that's happening, and it's happening on so many different levels. Like the awareness is popping up everywhere in tons and tons of different ways. So really the specific aspect I wanted to touch on today was the victim mentality, because it's such a large part of our society, and it's inundated in the way we interact with reality, the way we raise our children, the way we speak, the way we interact with each other. It's inundated so much that most of the time we don't even know when we're doing it. I personally can speak for myself. I catch myself dropping into victim mentality. Almost regularly in little ways, nothing big. And victim mentality is a huge pet peeve for me. I don't like it because it's that rebellious edge of me, that feeling like I'm somebody's victim just rubs me the wrong way. I don't like the energy of it. I don't like, I've done past life experiences and meditations and all guided and non-guided and all this stuff. And I don't think this lifetime is the only time the only aspect that has fueled this, is I have very specific memories of past lives where the control and the abuse over me was extreme, just like many people. So the victim mentality is something that I really don't like. And the energy of it, I can pick up on immediately when somebody's talking and help them shift that, But like I said, I still catch myself doing it regularly because it's so inundated in our way of thinking and our way of being right now. And it's just little ways nowadays. I don't think I really drop in any big ways, but who knows? So the victim mentality is really where we are. And, other spiritual teachers have talked about it. I remember, like Michael Bernard Beckwith has a beautiful, like stages of spiritual expansion or growth. And, I'll paraphrase here. This isn't exactly it, I'm sure, but he basically says like we start at the victim mentality, which I don't know if I would classify the society as, you know, thousands of years ago as victim mentality. In a way, yes. In a way, no. But anyway, he says, he's talking about where we are now anyway. So he talks about going from the victim mentality to understanding spiritual principles to stabilize our life and earthly structures like relationships and finances, things like that. Understanding our own power, expanding spiritually, not as the end game, as he says, but as a leaping off point to really freeing up our energy from all that day-to-day stuff and really living our purpose, putting our energy towards really living our purpose, right? So this is I think for a lot of people on a spiritual path, this victim mentality thing is something that many people are aware of, so much so that it's trickled into society now. Most people that they're not even on a spiritual path. It's this, the shift has picked up so much speed and it's integrated in our society so much that like manifest was the number one word in 2024 based on Cambridge Dictionary. And I did a podcast on that. So these spiritual terms they are coming into our society and they are becoming commonplace. These terms and the mentality. Now, granted, most people don't understand the mentality of them very well. They just hear the term. And victim mentality is a good example of that. People have heard of victim mentality. They heard of people playing the victim, and they know that it's a negative thing. Unfortunately, they're still completely ego-based. So all they want to do is if they're completely ego-based, they're not really understanding victim mentality very well. So their goal is to not view themselves and not have other people view themselves as a victim or as being in victim mentality. That's all they know about it. They know it's a bad thing. So therefore they don't want people to think that of them, and they don't want to think that about themselves. That's it. They haven't gone any deeper. They're not willing to actually go in, understand the concepts, see where they are being a victim, and then shift their mindset perspectives. That's the real deeper spiritual work. And that's for the people that are really on the path. Most people are just, heard about victim mentality in a yoga class for 13 seconds. And they're like, then they talk to their friend about it when they're rolling up their mat after, and maybe over some tea after. And then now, they think they wrap their brain around victim mentality. And they haven't. But that's part of the shift. It's not judgment. This is just reality. This is part of where we are in the shift. Not everybody is at the same place in the shift, and we're not going to be for a long time. There's going to be people that understand. Like, I kind of simplify it by saying there's three groups of people in most situations, and there's one group that, like in my book, I think I phrased it this way. There's people who understand, and then there's people who understand when they were told and explained, and then there are people who still don't understand even after it was explained to them, because they're just not ready to perceive it yet, right? That's not the exact term I used, but you get the point. So some people aren't going to wake up in this lifetime. It's just not in the cards for them. Then they're not going to. Most will. And we have many people that are already awake, And I don't know what they did to the term awake. Now I've heard versions of it, they're woke. Woke is a term now. And from what I've seen, they've just, wherever there is progress, there is somebody trying to pull back the progress. We live in a dualistic world. There's two sides to every coin. So where there are people trying to wake up, there are people who are trying to not allow us to wake up. There's a pro and a con force for and against. So, that's, whether it's conscious or not is another story. But for some reason, people said that like woke. I don't even know what they're saying about it now. But it's, woke came from an awakening, a spiritual awakening, and it's a beautiful thing. That it's finding out that all is love and your life is your responsibility, all these wonderful things. And somehow they just started saying, well, no, that means something else now. That means you don't take responsibility for your life. You're floating around woo-woo, or I don't even know what they say. But somehow it's turned into a negative, has a negative connotation now. And that's just the other side. So, which we don't have to worry about. It doesn't change anything. It's just the people that are going to stay stuck use it to stay stuck longer. And the people that are trying to awaken, if they latch onto it and get all pissed off about it, it's going to drag them down like anything else. So, my recommendation is just don't worry about it. We don't have to argue with the people who are not going to wake up, because they're not going to wake up. So why spend our time arguing? Like, what our job is to be awakened and to live our best lives personally. Why? Because it's attraction rather than promotion. It's not, we don't need to go to the middle people who don't understand yet. Those are the ones that are going to come over. We don't have to drag them over kicking and screaming. We don't have to prove anything to them. All we have to do is be the opposite of the other side. That's all. The other side is filled with anger and hatred and frustration and dysfunction. All we have to do is not be that. If we just be love and live simple, peaceful, contented lives, and they're in the middle and they're saying, I think there's a different way to live. I'm not sure. Geez, which way should I go? They're going to look over at the dysfunction and they're going to be like, well, that's where I just came from and it was really painful. What's over here? Oh, the other side is peaceful and loving and they seem really happy and joyful and it's actually attainable. Want to give that a shot? And they'll just do it. Like, if people are exposed to something that makes them feel good and they're exposed to something that makes them feel bad, why would they possibly choose the thing that makes them feel bad? As a general rule, they're not going to. I mean, of course, some people will through conditioning, but as a general rule, a large majority of the people are going to choose what feels better and what looks better. Why? Because that's what they want. Everybody wants to be happy. So if they're looking at, a group of people that are happy and looking at a group of people that are pissed off and they want to be happy, they're probably going to lean in the direction of the people that are happy. So we don't have to run around outside of ourselves trying to change the world and all this. We just have to be living examples of a peaceful, loving way of life. That's it. That's what's going to change the world. Okay. So to dive into this victim mentality a little bit more, I guess I saw an extra step in there, which I found interesting. So I saw it as a stepping stone to our waking up. So we went from centuries and thousands of years of us just accepting the dysfunction and this way of life that was out of balance and toxic masculine oriented and war and different. Some people got everything and most people got nothing and all. We went through all that, and now we're coming out of that through our awareness awakening. This is why woke isn't a bad thing. It's just becoming more aware of reality. Like it's so through our awareness, all of a sudden we went into the questioning period, and there's big overlap here. Okay, people, there's big overlap because it's, like I said, turning an ocean liner around. So it takes a while. We don't go in one phase for 10 years and then 10 years and one day later we start a new phase. There's billions of people in this world, and we're all in different places. So it starts with a small group of people, and then that group gets larger, and then the people that are, I don't like using the word behind in spiritual terms, but just to explain this, the people that aren't ready to wake up yet, there's going to be people in the front that are already awake, and then the people behind them are just thinking about awakening and trying to understand it, and then the people behind them that aren't going to wake up at all. So it's like, and then the people in the front get into the next stage, and then the people in the middle are just getting into the stage that the people in the front just got out of. So this is what explains all the overlap. And we have to really be loving and accepting of one another because of that, which is an aspect of us awakening and living in a world based in love. Right now, I think we're caught up judging everybody. It's part of this victim mentality we're stuck in. And we have to get out of that, especially us at the forefront. We keep looking back and going, these people don't understand what's happening in the world. They're such idiots. They're morons. And it's like, whoa, that's judgment. That's not unconditional love. That's not what we're going into. That's what we're trying to come out of. And you're using it to stay latched on to the past, our old way of being. That's not unconditional love. Like, part of this shift is unconditional love. We have to accept one another as we are. And those of us in the forefront, if we spend all our time looking backwards, being pissed off at the people that haven't woken up yet, that's not acceptance. It's not love. That's not what we're doing. That's not where we're going. That's not what we're trying to create. Right? So, during this transitional phase, we're going from, this overlap makes it somewhat hard to explain the different stages, because every time I want to get to the next stage, I'm like, yeah, but we're not really there yet. But some people are, but some people aren't. So I don't know. So bear with me. So during this shift from victim mentality, we're going from questioning things to realizing the dysfunction and realizing what's so messed up. And I think that we do that on a external level, which I just touched on a few minutes ago. What I meant by that was, like, we blame everything on external because we're addicted to the external. That's another problem. We think that if everything was going the way we wanted it to in our life, then we would be happy inside, which that's not how reality works. Happiness comes from within. And that's not just a saying, it's literal. So, like, once you're happy inside, then your external circumstances will start reflecting that back to you. And some things that used to bother you because they weren't the way you wanted them to be, it won't bother you because you're happy inside. And just the fact that something isn't exactly the way you want it outside doesn't affect that. Plus, our external reality will start reflecting more pleasant things back to us because that's what we're putting out energetically. So, since we're addicted to the external, most people are seeing the dysfunctional around them, outside of them. They're not really seeing it inside. And this is one of the areas that we're in right now. We're starting to see it from the inside. So, the little specific piece that I saw that I hadn't seen before was we're starting to understand that the victim mentality, the dysfunction on planet Earth in the way that we live is affecting all of us on a very, very, very deep foundational level. Like, we're starting to draw the line from, like, I just did a podcast on the school system. So I'll use that as an example. So when I was talking about the school system, I had done some journeying and some meditations, and I had gone in and back to my childhood self and literally experienced the excruciating pain and suffering that I experienced as a child by being told I wasn't good enough daily, and that I was bad the way I was naturally, and that I wasn't acceptable as a human being the way that I was. And hearing my name in a negative context just multiple times a day, every day for 12 years, like that's traumatic. That, you know what that does to a child's self-esteem? I mean, how could you possibly love yourself? How could you possibly have any self-esteem when all the adults, all the people that are supposed to know more than you because they've been on planet Earth, just incessantly tell you every day, all day, that there's something wrong with you and you're a bad person because you don't fit into their system? It's, it ended up in 20 years of alcoholism for me. So this is one of our problems, and it's not just the school system. It's aspects of our parental system, aspects of parental alienation. I see it in that, the divorce, and not allowing people to see their children, and the hatred and the anger in this world, and the all these misconceptions that have been building up for thousands of years. We have no idea of reality. Like, so we're starting to come to that awareness, and we're starting to go like, oh my God, like no wonder I was so messed up. And we're making that connection. And we're understanding, they've proven scientifically that negative reinforcement does not change negative behavior. It can deter it for a while, but it's going to come back up because you haven't dealt with the problem. You've dealt with the symptom, which is, the symptom is somebody acting out in a negative way. That's a symptom. That's not the problem. There's a reason that they're acting out in a negative way. And we don't deal with that. We just try to control behavior, fit into the system, control behavior, fit into the system, control behavior. And that doesn't work. We're not robots. We're human beings. We have feelings and emotions, and you just can't run a society like that. It just creates dysfunction, and people don't understand that, yes, maybe the majority are capable of fitting into the system, but what about the ones that aren't? Like, we have more prisons and more prisoners on this planet than we ever have before, and it's just increasing dramatically, consistently. Right. Why? It doesn't work. Like, we've researched all this stuff. We understand it from a scientific, psychological level. We know why it doesn't work. And we even know what does work. But we're not willing to change it as a society yet because it hasn't trickled in and affected our lives deeply enough. And not enough people understand it. But this is part of the shift. This is what we're getting to. People are starting to draw the line. They're starting to go, oh, wait. Like, I had a cousin that I grew up with we had so much fun when we were little. And then now they're a career criminal. How did that happen? And like when I talk to them, like, if I run into them every 10 years, they're still the same person I grew up with. They're a good person. How could they choose that life? Like what happens is, my point is that we're not taking, if you create a system that works well for 50% of the people and not well but manageable for 25% of the people, and not well at all for 25% of the people, then what you have is you have 50% of society that's doing fine. You have 25% of society who are functioning at half levels because they never really became who they were supposed to be, because they weren't nourished in the right way. But they're not really aware of it, and they're not really causing that big of a problem, so we don't pay attention to them. And then you've got 25% of people that are traumatized because they don't fit into the system and they're told they're bad. And then they start lashing out because they see no hope. They see no way to fit in. There's nothing else for them to do. They've tried everything that they possibly can, and society has rejected them in every way possible. So instead of fitting into society, they try to get what they want. Can we blame them? Like, you can't have a functional society like that. You can't have a functional society by flushing 25% of it down the toilet and still having it, like, they're still in your community. You didn't get rid of them just because you threw them out of school or you kicked, you put them in jail for a few years. You didn't get them out of your society. They're still part of your society, and their dysfunction is still going to bleed in. And it's going to get worse and worse and worse. This is why the crime levels are horrible. Like, so our system just doesn't work on a logical level. And we're getting to the point where, we're not there yet, but what I'm seeing is we're getting to the point where we're starting to go, like, even the people that aren't career criminals or, that weren't completely traumatized, like that middle group, they're starting to go, you know what? Like Glenn talked about literally being traumatized for 12 years in school. It wasn't that bad for me, but now that I think about it, I was not nourished in any way. Like when I was a kid, I was actually highly intelligent and capable and very, very creative. And somehow over those years of school, that creativity got just beaten out of me psychologically because I wasn't allowed to think for myself. I just needed to retain facts and regurgitate them back. And when I tried expressing my original thoughts, it was diminished and I lost a lot of my creativity. Like they did a study where, what was it? I think it was a NASA study or somebody from NASA, and it was like 98% of children, like that, of this group that they did this years ago. Like 98% of the children tested as creative geniuses when they were like 5 years old or younger or something, right around there. 98% tested as creative geniuses. And then they kept testing them as they got older. And by the time they were adults, it was dramatically lower. Like by the time they got out of the school system, it was something like maybe 13%, from 98 down to like 13. And it very well might even be lower than that. Check, you can check it out. So the system and our upbringing, it pulls our individuality and our creativity right out of us. So there's no way we can become who we're supposed to become. And this is what affects society. And we're starting to see that now. The people who are suffering dramatically are starting to go, wait a minute. There's nothing wrong with me. I just didn't fit into a dysfunctional system. And the people in the middle are starting to see the same thing. Now, the people that fit in the system, they're probably going to see it last. However, some of them will see it very quickly because since they fit into the system, their individuality and their creativity wasn't beaten out of them so much. They just happened to fit into the system, so they could actually get some types of nourishment out of the system because it aligned with who they were. Just luckily, you know. What I've seen is a lot of them aren't really good at seeing how bad the system is, though, because they didn't experience the negativity. They're over there kind of, for lack of a better term, in their ivory tower, just the system worked for them. So how were they supposed to know it didn't work for other people? And then the people it didn't work for, all of society said it was, no, they have disorders. They have attention deficit disorder. They have dyslexia, disability. They are disabled. They are dysfunctional. They have disorders. There's something wrong with these people. There's nothing wrong with society. And, since they fit in, they were like, yeah, okay. Makes sense. From it. But what we're doing is we're finding that out that it's not that way. Society is dysfunctional. It is. It's just the way we live, the busyness, the constant working, the stress levels, the speed, this is just not how human beings are made to live. And we've just started living like this over the last 200-300 years. For thousands and thousands and thousands and thousands of years, human beings did not live like this. They had moments of stillness in their day. It's just recent. And then you throw in the technology with the phones and the 342 TV channels and distraction and the age of information. And it's just like we're constantly going and inundated. And we've only been like that for about 30 years. So this is new. And we're so adaptable, we're just getting used to it. And we think that this is life. And if you talk to anybody, how's things? Oh, busy. Going 90 miles. You know how it is. Things are tough. Blah, blah, blah. It's like, and we think that's normal. That is dysfunctional as all hell, man. There's no way to live. A lot of people are so caught up into it, but a lot of us are seeing it, and we're kind of dropping back into a more simple life. So, once we start understanding how it's actually affecting us and how it affects a lot of other people and how dysfunctional society is, then we can start changing it. That's our catalyst to start ushering in this new way of being based in love. We have to get back to, we have to get back to a simpler life, and we do. Okay, one aspect of that, I think, is smaller communities. We can have smaller communities within large communities. So I heard something that was interesting. I think it was last week. There was a study done, and they said it's somewhere around 150 to 200 people ballpark. I'm sure it could vary up to maybe 300 or 500 or something, but they were using 150 to 200 people is the amount of people that when you have that amount in a community, generally there isn't crime issues. There isn't issues where one is really going after another too much. I mean, it still happens to some degree, but it's minimized dramatically. And the reason is because when you only have 150 to 200 people within a community, you know them all. Whether you like them all or whether you don't, it doesn't really matter. But everybody is associated with somebody else. So let's say I have a problem with another guy. Now, for me to demonize that guy and go out and try to hurt that guy, then what I would have to do is I would have to affect somebody that he's associated with that I do like. Right? So maybe the guy's a jerk, in my opinion, but his wife is really nice, or he has some kids that the kids play with my kids, or he's a good carpenter and helps out with other people to build their houses. Like, so he has connections with other people that I know and that I care of. So before I go after him and say you're bad, I'm going to, I don't even know how you, how you do it, because we're not going to physically fight, right? So I'm trying to come up with some other. I'm going to yell at you verbally, and I'm going to pour sugar in your gas tank, or I'm going to try to disrupt your life in some sort of negative way, right? For me to disrupt that person's life in a negative way, then I'm affecting those other people that like him. Now, all of a sudden, they're looking at me going, geez, Glenn, why are you attacking this person that we love and care for and is good in our lives? So I'm probably not going to do it out of respect for the other people that I care about. I'll find another way. I'll probably drop into a place of acceptance and be like, okay, well, I don't like aspects of him, but whatever. There's obviously good to him because people that I care about actually like him. It must be just a difference of opinion. So whatever. And I let it go instead of it turning into this dehumanizing him and labeling him as bad and trying to hurt him. Right. So this is one of the ways that smaller communities function better, just naturally, because we're more connected to one another. So this is the type of, I know that that's kind of an extreme example because, people are going to be sitting there going like, well, I'm not going to move to this intentional community with 150 people. It's like, I get it. You don't have to. That's just one example of millions of examples that we can do. And that it was an example to try to expose you that to an idea where if we lived in a different way, it wouldn't be so dysfunctional. Because that's a lot of the things that come up when you start talking about this. People like think that we're gonna, they perceive it as jumping from the world we live in now into this completely different reality, which it will be eventually, but we can't just jump over the middle period. We have to go through a transition period. We have to start implementing stuff. So if there comes a time where we all live in communities that are 150 to 200 people globally around the world, if a time like that comes, it's not going to come anytime soon. Like, some of us can go do it now, but globally, there's no way the globe is going to be like that in 10 years or 20 years or, or it's unlikely. I can't say, I don't know, maybe there'll be some huge awakening or something, whatever, but it's very unlikely that it's going to happen in the next 10 years. It's just too big of a transition to come to, but that doesn't mean it's a bad idea. It doesn't mean that we can't put it in our brain and use it as a conceptual understanding of what's possible and why it's possible, and how when we get back to living in ways that are more nurturing and natural for us, that our lives enhance. And that's really what I'm talking about, is getting to a place where we start looking at society and all its dysfunctions and going, instead of being victims of it, going, first we have to understand why we're victims of it. And like just going, oh my God, like I was conditioned in ways that I had no idea I was conditioned. And it really affected me in my life dramatically. Wow. Oh my God. And then go from that awareness to, I'm going to choose not to live like this anymore. I'm going to choose to live a simpler life that's more fulfilling. I don't give a crap what society is doing. I'm not living like this. I'm not working until I'm 65 and then dropping dead within 2 years and missing most of my life. It's just ridiculous. Living stressed out all the time. So, this is this shift that we're seeing. So once we start understanding really, and we have to personalize it to some degree. And I'm going to wrap up with this. It's like, we have to understand how it's hurting us, because that gives us the motivation to change. If we just sit back and pretend it's not affecting us, then that's how we've lived in a dysfunctional society all these years, is by just leaning back and pretending that there's nothing that we can do about it, or it doesn't affect us that bad, or something like that. And as your awareness starts awakening, you start understanding that everybody is affected by living in a dysfunctional society, because it affects society, and society is just a group of people. Like, so you might be okay in certain aspects of your life, but you know what? The reason that somebody broke into your house and harmed your family or stole your goods, even though you were living a peaceful, happy, wonderful life, the reason that somebody did that, or people have targeted you, or to take away these wonderful things that you've created in your life, is because you just looked at society and went, well, it works for me. And you're not paying attention to how it's not working for the other people, thinking it's not going to affect you. And then years go by, and then all of a sudden, the people that are in society that are getting traumatized by the systems are lashing out. And guess who they're lashing out at? They're lashing out at you. So yes, it does affect you. Welcome. You're not separate from your society. You're in it. So like, even if society, somehow you were able to fit into a dysfunctional society and drink the Kool-Aid and pretend that it's not that bad, and you're like, oh geez, I don't know what everybody's complaining about. Okay, well, fine. If that's the perspective you'd like to take, then you can take that. But when somebody, that is being traumatized by obvious dysfunctional things that need to be changed, and nobody's willing to change them, and it spills into your life, don't get pissed off, because you're part of what's enabling that. By just going, yeah, I don't see anything wrong. Seems fine to me. Okay, all right. Unfortunately, when you attempt to flush 25% of your society down the toilet and pretend that they don't exist, you find out that they still do exist, and they actually do impact you in negative ways. So maybe instead of it cracks me up. Everybody, cheers when people say "No child left behind." This is a big hoorah moment. As long as that means that somebody in the government is passing a law or something, or the government decided to throw a few $1 billion at it and try to change things, everybody's on board for no children left behind, because they don't have to do anything about it. But when it affects their actual life, and all of a sudden this in their community, and they actually have to stand up and say, you know what? Like, why is our school system and our prison system set up the way it is if we've proven scientifically that it doesn't work? And society's getting more and more criminals, worse and worse and worse. And I'm starting to be affected. So could we usher in the new system that we found out through research and scientific discoveries that does work? Why don't we do that? Good idea. And that's where we're heading. This is why when I see society crumbling out there, everybody's like panicking and going, oh my God. I'm like, good. The system was shot. It was built on faulty information that didn't work. And it's creating more and more dysfunction in the world over and over because of its existence. So the fact that it's crumbling and falling apart is a wonderful thing, in my opinion. Good. Let's create systems that actually work with the information that we've acquired through all this studying that we've done. We've come to the conclusions. We figured out what works. We just aren't willing to implement them because it's a big change. Too big. So we go, well, we'll just pretend the system that we have works a little longer. And just don't say anything. Don't release these studies to the people, because then they're going to want us to change it. And ignorance is bliss. So, all right, peeps, that's going to do it. Thanks for listening. I will talk with you soon. Peace.